Welcome everybody here back to the missing link.
Yeah, my claim to fame, I guess, is back in junior days in Medicine Hat, playing with the Medicine Hat Tigers. I was fortunate enough to play with Tom Lysiak and Lanny McDonald. Um, One night in 1972, October 7th, happens to be Vladimir Putin's 20th birthday, which I didn't know until recently. I scored 5 goals in 3 minutes and 7 seconds, which is a very significant number, which we'll talk about today. My book is titled Under the Radar 537 555 Trumpets. The back of the book, it has the Masonic, what they call the Saturn cube, the Black Sun, or the Masonic cube. My record happens to be the middle three numbers, 537. Once you understand the numerology of the Masonic law, or the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians, etc. Now, when you're watching the news, it all comes together. Everything is planned out. I believe I cracked the code for the New World Order. I just want to mention, if you Google quantum 537-555, you'll find a white paper on the spin of electrons, which takes us to CERN, which I'll get into later. I don't want to confuse people, but today I want to talk about quite a few things. The main topic, two of the main topics, I guess, is FTX. You've heard of FTX, the cryptocurrency exchange that declared bankruptcy. Well, Donald Trump owns 2 golf courses with Hussein Shazwani, who I met a few times in Dubai back in 2007. And, I can tell you that, the ruler of Saudi Arabia, I met him probably 6 times in Thomas's office. I met Hussein Shazwani. I actually hooked Hussein Shazwani up twice to my quantum biofeedback device. And the ruler of Abu Dhabi, the ruler of Dubai, they're all the ones that backed Malaysian Airlines 370 gold heist. They moved over 55,500 tons of gold. I scored 5 goals in 3 minutes and 7 seconds. Now, this is a record that nobody will ever break. In fact, if you divide 5 into 187 seconds, you'll get one goal every 37.4 seconds. So anyway, I just happen to have the number. And from that point on, I played probably 15 years of professional hockey, and I quit when I was around 30. And I'm going to fast forward here. In 2006, 2007, I was living in the penthouse in Waterloo, Ontario, at the Seagram Barrows warehouses, right across the street from the Perimeter Institute, which is quantum theoretical physics, attached to the University of Waterloo. This is where they study quantum, mechanics and quantum physics. And of course, the University of Waterloo, the dean was David Johnson, who went on to be our Governor General. But he was the dean of Waterloo. This is where they developed the BlackBerry cell phone, which is on a completely different frequency as other cell phones are. And I'll tell you why. Very corrupt. But Stephen Harper would come down to Waterloo all the time. Now, John Baird as well. John Baird, who became Stephen Harper's Minister of Foreign Affairs. And of course, he quit the government back in 2000, and I think it was 2015. He quit the government and went to work for Barrick Gold. So as I said, FTX basically the owner, the parent company was owned by Barry and Alan Silbert, again, who are on page 9 in my book. And I'll just read you page 9 quickly. Maybe before, well, okay. I'll just, a $500,000 Bali villa, the biggest Bitcoin purchase ever. That was done in 2014 on March the 14th. Now, Malaysian Airline 370, if people have watched my videos, I recommend them all watch my videos on SGT Report, etc. But Barry and Alan Silbert owned Bit Premier, okay? And they purchased this villa for the pilot of MH370 for him to hide out. They gave him $10 million in a villa in Bali. What got me to Dubai in 2007, I was 53, 537, was the fact that I was in charge of what they call quantum biofeedback medical devices. But the sheikh that was in charge of Saudi Arabia's health and food wanted to start 1,000 wellness clinics throughout the Middle East and put one of our devices into each one. This is what brought me to Dubai, and this is where I ran into Thomas. Thomas was the middleman. He was the main planner for Malaysian Airline 370, plus a lot more, this whole New World Order plan. They showed me a 20-page document in 2008 that basically everything that's happening today was in that 20-page document. It was all about Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies, how they were going to go up and down. And today is the winter solstice. 2 years ago today, Donald Trump's lawyer, Sidney Powell, announced that she released the Kraken. And that was also in the 20-page document that I read in 2008, released the Kraken. Now, they released the Kraken. They tried it out on Ethereum in 2017. At Christmas time in 2016, Ethereum was worth about $10. And by June of 2017, it went up to $388. And what happened is when it went down to 10 cents and then back up again in 2 seconds. That's releasing the Kraken. This is what FTX is all about. This is what Kraken in San Francisco, a big cryptocurrency exchange, is all about. This is what China, who owns over 65% of all the cryptocurrencies, is all about. North Korea, Japan, they got in first. They created ISIS. Okay, I met al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. He walked right into Thomas's office. Thomas was a Jesuit. He wore a kippah with a baseball hat over top. And his partner was Richard Leibel from Bangkok. Prior to that, he's a Saskatchewan boy, okay, born and raised around Regina. And of course, I'm going to lead up to all this stuff later on after you hear this, but I hope people could bear with me because I think the story of the millennium when talking about Saskatchewan first and how Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba want to create their own currency and become independent. This is why they were behind this Malaysian Airline 370 takedown. It was a gold heist. It was a mass murder. There's no doubt about it. And this is why both planes went down in the Ukraine. And this is why Stephen Harper sent our military to the Ukraine on January 1st, 2014, to prepare our military for the cleanup of MH370. So they use the same mathematics because they worship the number 5 from Shiva. Shiva is the god of everything, the god of creation and the god of destruction. Right now, we are on the destruction mode until the new world comes in 2025.
What did he say?
Right now, we are on the destruction mode until the new world comes in 2025.
Let me quote the occult world directly. Now, Alice A. Bailey, 2025 hierarchy will manifest itself. Now, this is interesting. Now, Alice A. Bailey is basically the prophetess for the United Nations.
Yes.
She is the one that followed Blavatsky.
Yes.
Now, when I was still involved in all of these things, I was pertinently told by one of the highest channels in the world that if you are a student of Blavatsky, then you have arrived.
Yes.
Now, this is a personal experience. And Alice A. Bailey, of course, Temple of Understanding and all of these things in the United Nations, they are schooled. The whole education system is schooled on Alice A. Bailey. Let's have a look at this quote. It comes from her book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy. But we must explain who the hierarchy is.
Mm-hmm.
The hierarchy are those spiritual
Masters.
entities that run the world from behind the scenes. This is a reality in the thinking of the United Nations, right?
Correct.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have it as an official organization affiliated to the United Nations.
Yes.
And this hierarchy, if you know your Bible, is of course a demonic hierarchy. These are demons communicating with humanity.
Yes.
This is what it is. Now, you can look at the publisher. It was written in 1957, and it's Lucis Trust, which originally was Lucifer Publishing Company. But the name was too much in the face, so they changed it to Lucis Trust. Same thing. She writes, "Thus a great and new movement is proceeding, and a tremendously increased interplay and interaction is taking place." Interaction with whom?
Yes.
This will go on until, that's stunning, AD 2025. During the years intervening between now and then, very great changes will be seen taking place. When was this written?
1957.
1957. In 2025, the date in all probability will be set for the first stage of the externalization of the hierarchy. What does that mean? Where they will present themselves to humanity so that you can see them face to face. Does that sound like Satan masquerading as an angel of light, saying, "I am the Christ, I have come back"?
Yes, I've changed the laws.
Didn't we deal with that in the spirit of prophecy? That he will say, "I have changed the laws." So must there have been an attempt to keep Sunday by that stage?
Yes.
Is he reinforcing it?
Yes.
Were there calamities that led people to believe these things? We're just putting it into a biblical scenario. Which countries would be hardest hit? Those that had
The light Protestant countries.
and rejected it. National apostasy will be followed by?
National ruin.
Interesting. 2025. The date in all probability will be set for the first stage of the externalization of the hierarchy. The present cycle from now until that date. Is she making that date prominent?
Yes.
What was the date in Deagle?
2025.
What was the date in that movie clip?
2025.
Who runs Hollywood?
Jesuits.
Jesuit Theater. Fascinating. The present cycle from now until that date is called technically the stage of the forerunner. Forerunner to whom?
Satan.
Satan.
Going back to CERN and Shiva, the country of India, back in 2004, I think it was, they donated a 4-foot statue of Shiva, the god of destruction. That's the symbol for CERN. And CERN worships the number Their symbol is 666. Okay. The reason they had the G20 meetings in Bali, and that's where they stashed the pilot. Okay. FTX, who just went bankrupt, their parent company, again, I'm going to stipulate it because it's very important, was owned by Barry and Alan Silbert, who bought that villa for the pilot of MH370 back in 2014. And that's where he was stashed away. Yeah, see, there's Obama, you know, mocking the world by, you know, faking, like he's acting like he's Shiva. That's what he's doing there.
He's mocking God. He's mocking all the globe earth and money and a helicopter and pretending he's the God of all things, but he's the destroyer.
You got to understand, we were under the thumb of the Queen and Prince Charles. And, you know, I'm not going to take that any further, but Western Canada is not, they're also very, very guilty. Okay. We're not saints, or the people around here aren't. They've all been bought out. I mean, look at what's going on in Saskatchewan. We're building a $300 million vaccine factory called Vito, and they bring in Volker Gertz from East Germany to run it. You know, he was educated on the island of Reims in the Baltic. The island of Reims held the Frederick Loeffler Institute since 1894. And it was all about bioweaponry. The Nazis took it over in the 30s and used it for Second World War. And then when the Berlin Wall went up after the war, the Soviet Union used the Frederick Loeffler Institute to do their bioweaponry for, you know, East Germany. They got rid of a lot of people in Dresden and places like that. And we're doing the same thing here in Saskatchewan. So I'm trying to bring awareness to everyone to understand what's going on. You know, Scott Moe just got back from Dubai, and he's all proud of the fact that Saskatchewan's booming, which we are, because BHP Billiton, an Australian, the largest mining company in the world, just pumped in almost $8 billion into a potash mine in Jensen. But to me, this is my opinion, that was all free money. That was all Bitcoin money. Because who wrote the code for Bitcoin was Richard Leibel from Regina, Saskatchewan. They deported him out of here in 1999. If you go on and Google Richard Leibel court case, you know, he started the Willows Golf Course in Saskatoon. That was all Asian money. And he changed the laws of the Saskatchewan government, you know, when he was in Regina, to allow Asian money to come into Saskatchewan. That's why the largest landowner in Saskatchewan his last name is Ho from China. This is why Alberta is selling out to Li Ka-shing, who owns Husky Oil, you know? So understand what's happening, folks. You know, Elon Musk's mother, May Musk, who I've seen some recent photos of her. I mean, we're talking Masonic, witches, warlocks, adrenochrome. You know, he helped Richard Leibel write the code for Bitcoin because, you know, him and I forget the guy's name, wrote, they owned PayPal previous to that. And so
Peter Thiel.
And so Elon Musk spent his summers right around Moose Jaw. Okay. And of course, that's where Elon Musk's mother was born in Regina and his grandmother was born in Moose Jaw. So, you know, Moose Jaw, the home of Al Capone, and underground tunnels and Prohibition and Chicago, and the head of Boeing, which you got to understand, both Malaysian Airlines 370 and MH17 were Boeing 777s. Their head office is in Chicago. John McAfee, who hired all the hackers in the world to create his antivirus software, which is hackable. So, and these were the guys stealing all people's Bitcoins from 2009 when it first came out through the, up until MH370 took place. Many Bitcoin exchanges were robbed, hundreds of them, for millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And, just prior to MH370's disappearance, two of the largest crypto Bitcoin exchanges, Mt. Gox in Japan, got robbed for $850 million worth of Bitcoin.
And that was at that time prices, which that's probably billions when it jacked up to like 40, 50, $60,000, $70,000 per Bitcoin.
Well, this is before. This is in 2014.
Well, that's what I mean. But the price of the Bitcoin, if it was 800 million at the time before Bitcoin skyrocketed, that's, we're talking about billions of current value dollars, like billions and billions of current value dollars.
Exactly. This is why, so see, Silk Road did all their Silk Road did, I'll backtrack here. Mt. Gox in Japan, the exchange that had over $850 million worth of Bitcoin at that time, did all their guns and weapons to supply ISIS and all these terrorist groups. They used Norwegian freightways to do the shipping, you see, because Norwegian freightways, the Norwegian government was the biggest investor of Glencore at that time, okay? And that's when Glencore stock, which owned Viterra, and the second largest mining company in the world and the largest commodity broker in the world, started by Mark Rich, who was pardoned by Bill Clinton on the last hour of his presidency. And then who took over was Ivan Glasenberg, the guy that called me to tell me Thomas had a stroke. You can get this all in my other videos, but so, and then Silk Road, it got robbed because, you see, they have the code. What people don't understand is the blockchain that they're trying to get every industry on has a back door to the Swiss Jewish bankers, okay? Once industries grab onto the blockchain, now they are controlled 100%. If they don't abide by the rules, they're destroyed, okay? But Silk Road, it also went down 2 weeks before Malaysian Airline 370 went missing, and it did all their drug cartel. So between the two of those exchanges at that time, there was $1.4 billion worth of Bitcoin that went to the federal government, okay? And that's when Kraken, they named Kraken in San Francisco as their regulator for the world for cryptocurrencies. And of course, they work together with FTX and this whole con game. At that time as well, in 2012, even before MH370 took place, Ralph Goodell, I believe, this is my thoughts, connected to Fortress. I don't know which one. I'm going to look that up. But it's a real estate company that bought 25 million, a lot of Saskatchewan people involved. They bought $25 million worth, and Alberta, I guess, $25 million worth of Bitcoin in 2012. And cashed in when Elon Musk put in 1.2 billion or 1.4 billion there a couple of years ago when Trump lost the election. They cashed out and they purchased the third largest grocery chain called Morrison's Groceries in the British Isles. And this is why the Queen moved Ralph Goodell over to London to be the Chancellor of Trade between Canada and the British Isles. And So it's stinky. It's all hidden. It's the occult. You know, they want to introduce. They want the Messiah, the so-called Messiah, to introduce aliens to the world in a huge way, in an unbelievable way. But that'll happen after they create famine, and this Antichrist shows up. They stick him into the third temple in Israel. They've got their red heifers ready to sacrifice, and they're going to rebuild the third temple. And this is why Trump, who really fronts the Shabbat Lubavitch with his son-in-law Jared Kushner, don't think Trump is a good guy. He's not. He's bought and paid for completely by the elite. Now, understand that Donald Trump's former finance guy, Steve Mnuchin, he's been living in Iceland for the past couple of years, okay? And the prime minister, or whatever it is in Iceland, is married to a Canadian, okay? And Iceland supplied 2 of the jumbo 747s through Icelandic Airlines out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, to transport the gold in the Malaysian Airline 370 gold heist, okay? They were heavily involved in what they called the Panama Papers. When they all got into cryptos, and I'm talking the elite, the royal family, the group of 300, which Stephen Harper is part of, and I have the whole list of them in my book. But they were laundering all their money through Iceland, and of course, Iceland is where everybody mines for cryptocurrency. They have all these mining rigs, which are owned by Hive out of Vancouver, which is owned by Frank Giustra.
Frank Giustra, yeah. He's a very bad dude too.
Right. So they're all involved. And I can remember when Donald Trump was president, the Icelandic people and him used to have fun together because they'd say, you're more Icelandic than you think, No, oh yeah. So going back to Brandt, so I do the research just yesterday. So I do some research on the name Brandt at the Nuremberg trials, because you got to understand, a lot of Nazis after the war came to Canada and settled in places like Moose Jaw, Medicine Hat. To make a long story short, Karl Brandt, born in 1904, married an Olympic class swimmer, which caught the attention of Hitler. So on their way to Berchtesgaden, which is the eagle's nest where Hitler hung out, Karl Brandt and his wife are driving in a convoy of vehicles, and the guy ahead of him fell off the cliff. The car went off the cliff, and Karl Brandt ran down and saved the guy's life. He was a top Nazi guy. Saved his life. And so Karl Brandt became Hitler's doctor. Okay? So put one and one together, Then you've got Elon Musk's mother's father, Haldeman, who worked with Mengele, the Nazi doctor, mind control, and Kharkov, the Ukrainian Satanists. They were stationed out of Chicago. There's that connection. Haldeman is in Moose Jaw. So you've got that same connection, And I found that very, very fascinating. I have a friend of mine. I mean, he's Mennonite background here from Saskatchewan. I grew up in small towns in Saskatchewan. And he became the number 2 guy for Deloitte & Touche globally. He lives in Aspen, Colorado today. He's part of the Aspen group. But he dealt with, and I think, Jesse, you and I talked about this last interview, because you helped me. He was into these takeovers and acquisitions in the 80s and did a lot with the Rothschild family out of France. And so he was an ex-hockey player too, and I communicated with him, and I finally, because I know they're all Freemasons, and I just said, Brian, I said, do you really worship Lucifer? And he emailed me back immediately and said, yes. Who do you worship, Boyd? And this Cameron Ortiz, could you play this one, please? He was a Mennonite guy from British Columbia, and he was a civilian who was put in charge of our Canadian National Intelligence Center called the NIC. That's even above CSIS, I believe, and it's above the RCMP, but it's called the National Intelligence Center in Ottawa. He was put in charge. 2 years later, he was put in jail. Okay. They caught him, his organization, with 30,000 gutted BlackBerry phones. Now, where does a BlackBerry come from? The University of Waterloo. Okay.
How it was used by organized crime.
Canadian businessman Vincent Ramos supplied communications to the criminal underworld.
What he was doing, based in the Vancouver area, was selling these gutted BlackBerry cell phones, which turned out to be heavily encrypted messaging devices, and he was selling them to criminals all over the world, really.
Once on opposite sides of the law, today, Cameron Ortiz and Vincent Ramos both face years behind bars.
Yeah, so people can watch that whole thing. I mean, it's amazing. They laundered between Toronto and Montreal as well. Prior to 2016, they were laundering tens of billions of dollars and using gutted BlackBerries from Waterloo. Now, who is the dean of Waterloo is David Johnston, who became our governor general. So here's the deal. They combine this mob or mafia with religion. And they call, like I say, they work in the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But they're mocking our Christianity. For example, Stephen Harper takes his orders from David Johnston, the Governor General. Okay? Because the Governor General takes his orders from the Queen of England. That's how it works. So David Johnston, again, is another criminal. I mean, he made trips to Saudi Arabia when he was Governor General. One trip cost $175,000. Okay? So it's all a scam. It's all criminal. You know, Hussein Shizwani fronts the most wealthiest family in Iran. They run the pistachio business. This is Donald Trump's best friend or business partner. And so it was Hussein Shizwani, the ruler of Dubai, the ruler of Abu Dhabi, and the ruler of Saudi, who put up the $600 million for the Malaysian Airline 370 gold heist. Okay? And today, Donald Trump and Hussein Shizwani own 2 golf courses in Dubai. They're on the ruler of Saudi, Mohammed bin Salman, who, the year I spent there in 2007, in 2008, he came into Thomas's office no less than 10 times, this Mohammed bin Salman. The guy who hacked up Khashoggi, the journalist at the embassy in Turkey a few years back. But yeah, so they backed that whole gold heist. And this is why Obama, when he was president, he went to Iran and he handed them $160 billion. And that was all part of the payoff of the gold heist, the gold. Because this was ancient gold. The only crypto, what I read in that 20-page document is by this time next year and getting into the beginning of 2024, Bitcoin will be worth less than $1,000. And it'll never come back. Ripple, XRP, all these other cryptos, they go down to zero. But Ethereum in 2025, then it'll drop down to 500, and then it'll start to climb again because of this announcement of the Eurasian oil being sold using Ethereum, and it'll go back up to about 1,200, and then it'll die again. It'll dive down to again around 600, because they have to put it back on the platform of ETC Classic. That was the original Ethereum platform. They did what they call a hard fork back in 2015 and split them because they developed Ethereum to handle contracts. But in order for Ethereum to function, it needs ETC Classic to be the governance for it, to create security. And it slows down the transaction processing, but not by much. And so both ETC Classic, which will come down to about $10 probably by 2024, you want to buy ETC Classic and Ethereum about a year and a half from now, or a year, and then they'll go up. Both of them will go way up. Ethereum probably to 5,000 to 10,000. ETC Classic, it'll go from $10 up to a couple of thousand. So I'm just giving everybody a tip on that. See, Sweden has already created their e-krona, which is a digital currency backed with their domestic product, their GDP, or whatever they want to call it, based on their natural resources. And because Western Canada is so strong in natural resources, Saskatchewan is the #1 place in the world today for natural resources. And this is why they had Richard Leibel. They deported him out of the country in 2000 to create this whole 16-year plan for the new world order. Between him and Elon Musk, etc., they created the cryptos. They created Bitcoin. They wrote the code. They took down MH370, and they're working together with the Ukraine. And this is why Saskatchewan today is taking all these Ukrainian refugees in. And, some of the friends I grew up with, because the Bronfman, when Trudeau ran for prime minister, his finance guy was Stephen Bronfman, the grandson of Samuel, who started Bronfman in Yiddish means liquor man. So he started the Yorkton, Saskatchewan, out of the Balmoral Hotel. He created the liquor business between Saskatchewan and Al Capone. This was the beginning of the relationship between Chicago and Western Canada. And a friend of mine who I played hockey against, he played for the Regina Pats. His name was Rick Urich. He died of a heart attack, but he was put in charge of McAfee Software out of Toronto. He was the president of McAfee. And I said, Rick, how did you ever get a job like that? He says, well, these guys in the 70s, they came up from Chicago and they recruited us, John McAfee, so to me, it's all a scam. This is what's been going on to get to where we are today. And if you want to play this is a reason why Alberta and Saskatchewan did a lot of black ops with the CIA. But it just talks about, there's a lady that comes on from the Saskatchewan government, and she's just saying how hard they worked to, get to this point where now they can be independent. See, because Canada is not a country, okay? I don't think it ever signed the Confederation or anything. It's just a colony. And, it's been totally controlled by the royal family. But the significance of 17 at CERN is 17 miles in circumference. It's a holodron, or I can't pronounce it, holodron collider, colliding electrons and neutrons and whatever. And 17 X17 is the God particle that they say they discovered, the fifth element. And also 17 at CERN means the ascension of DNA. And right now with depopulation, agriculture, and potash, the last thing I think they do with potash, they put in a luminous dust. And you see, with our food supply, now we're controlled by Bayer, a pharmaceutical out of Berlin, who purchased Monsanto, glyphosate, and Roundup, etc. And Saskatchewan is where they developed Agent Orange for the Vietnam War. So I want to bring this all to light to people so they understand that, yeah, this is what we deal with every day. Now, and this is one of the reasons the farmers are on board and the miners, because they're going to stop cross-Atlantic and cross-Pacific shipping due to global warming. And this is why Iceland is so involved, okay? This is why a Canadian is the wife of the president of Iceland, because they've expanded the harbor in Iceland. They're bringing anything coming into North America. And this is why John Baird works for Barrick Gold, Hatch, engineering firm, big in Winnipeg, and CP Rail. CP Rail just purchased a railway Kansas City Rail, and also a railway in Mexico, because they're going to bring everything from China into North America through the north, through the Arctic, down through the Hudson Bay, through Churchill, Manitoba. And they're going to CP Rail will redo that whole railway all the way down the middle of North America.
What that looks like, and I just recently wrote a letter to Scott Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan, and Heather Stephenson, the Premier of Manitoba, because if we could get an economic trade route along our northern territories between our three provinces, we can get access to a port that will allow us to export our products internationally. And so I propose that we meet in Churchill, which is the foundation for a port that might be able to begin that. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, we're going to get together and we're going to identify the corridor. We're going to work with our First Nations and Métis to make them equal partners in ownership. We're going to address the environmental issues of caribou habitat and other endangered species. We're going to make sure that we're avoiding the areas that are archaeologically or ceremonially significant for our First Nations communities. And once this corridor is built, then we'll invite the proponent to come in, because then we will have done our work of clearing away all those hurdles and be able to reduce those billions of dollars in regulatory costs. And that's a scrap that I'm willing to have with the federal government. This is their work, and they have failed to do this. We've been asking for them to do this since the 1930s. We've got a fantastic relationship with our First Nations communities, of which 100 of them are oil and gas producers themselves. They want to get their product to market too. And so I believe if it comes down to it, and the federal government tells us, wait a minute, you're invading our jurisdiction, I'll just say, look, we've got the right to develop our resources, conserve them, get them to market. Our First Nations, under the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, they have the right to be able to develop their resources too.
And then China will, of course, be over here by then. And they will create what they call free zones, Chinese free zones. They've already set up shop in Regina. They were going to put a big Chinese shopping center. It's a storefronts, hundreds and hundreds of storefronts. They were going to put it right into Dundurn, just 20 miles south of Saskatchewan. That's our military, the largest military storage of military equipment underground is in Dundurn. But now because they're greedy little guys in Saskatchewan. People like the premier, et cetera, all these business guys. They moved it to Regina. They've already sold the land to China, and they're putting in a big truck depot beside it because it's on the Trans-Canada Highway. So people from Western Canada, they'll be able to walk into these storefronts and order product right from China and have it delivered, 10-day delivery, whatever. But it's all going to come in through Churchill. And so Hatch, the engineering firm, will be the guys doing it, and CP Rail. This is why John Baird, he just signed a contract with Li Ka-shing. I just found that out today. So he is heavily involved with the Chinese. And this is Pierre Poilievre's cabinet manager. He's part of the World Economic Forum. Just want to bring this to light. Okay.
So he's the next one to step in as, running Poilievre, and because they've already paved the way with all the groundwork with the people around him for him to continue on with their plans.
Absolutely. But I talk about the military. I want to tell a story, a quick one. In 2016, when I finally found out about these 3 jumbo 747s, and I put the main part of the story together on MH370 and the gold heist and how they did it, because I couldn't figure out how they could get 55,000 tons of gold down at Perth until I found out about these 3 jumbo 747s left abandoned at the Kuala Lumpur airport. I mean, sometimes I forget where I park my car in the parking lot, but who forgets where they leave their jumbo 747? In fact, 3 of them. And so when I found this out, I was getting phone calls, and I got worried about my family. So I called the local Saskatoon chief of police here, Clive Wayhill. And I said, Clive, I know who did MH370. I know about the gold. I know about Bitcoin, the origin. He says, well, come on in Monday morning and let's chat about it. So I show up 9 o'clock Monday morning, and who has he got there is the head military. I think he's a lieutenant general at Dundurn. He was there, and his name is Denny 14. So I tell him the whole story, and it wasn't a week later, Trudeau flies into town. They hand him the tape because they recorded my conversation. And then Trudeau heads down to Medicine Hat. And I'm wondering, why Medicine Hat? But it's just, the next video we're going to watch will explain the trucker convoy bearing the Canadian flag. Okay, very significant. But so anyway, the next thing I find out, that Denny 14, this lieutenant general, he gets fired from the Canadian military for sexual harassment from some incident that happened in 1986. And he's going, what? I didn't do anything. So he gets suspended. Not even, and I've been trying to get a hold of him, but he won't return my call. So not even a month ago, about a month ago, they dropped the charges for Denny 14.
But he knew all this information, so they needed him out?
I guess, because he didn't do anything about it. I told my story, because I didn't know all the details I know today, but I knew a lot of them, and I just wanted them to know about the gold heist and the planes, and Saskatchewan's big involved, and Winnipeg, and all Denny 14 said to me after that talk, he says, "Boyd, those are great hockey records." Wow. So the Humboldt Bronco crashes happens in April of 2018. Who do they make chief coroner for Saskatchewan? Clive Wayhill, the chief of police. No medical background. So I called up Clive 2 months ago. I said, Clive, do you remember me? Remember Boyd Anderson? Yeah. I said, how did you ever become the chief coroner of Saskatchewan? I said, you have no medical background. He says, well, I wrote a 7-page essay on it, and they made me chief coroner. I said, oh. And I said, okay, so that was it. But
wow, someone wrote an essay for him, and then that he put his name on it. And
that whole Humboldt Bronco thing stinks to high heaven. I mean, the prosecuting lawyer, Thomas Healy, again, they use the name Thomas Healy. I don't know if you ever heard of the medical device called the Healy, but I'm sure he made a lot of overrides money on that because they made him a judge right after that. I mean, they got this East Indian guy off with 4 years. He's probably back in India, or who knows. But they made him a judge in Prince Albert, you see, because they got to develop that diamond mine just east of Prince Albert. And, of course, that's Rio Tinto. The royal family owns most of Rio Tinto.
I'm the founder of The Myth is Canada. And I did all the... Took me 14 years to put it all together, all the research, and regrettably, Canada is not a sovereign nation. Hasn't been. We have never confederated. We don't have a constitution. According to Justin Trudeau, in January of this year, in Quebec, he said the Constitution Act 1982-1867 doesn't apply to us because of the Quebec problem. And guess what? He was telling the truth. Yeah, it's never been ratified. In the UN, Canada is known as the landmass commonly known as Canada. When Justin went for a seat on the Security Council 2 years ago, he was asked, don't you people talk? I mean, we told this to the BC party last time they tried. You can't have a seat on the Security Council because you are not a sovereign nation. 1931 ended the Dominion of Canada with the Statute of Westminster. We were given the land held at the Court and Chancery on behalf of the British Empire so that we could seat a de jure federal government. We didn't. 1982, they brought in the Constitution Act, and it was never ratified, but they did incorporate the provinces under that act between 82 and 85, and each province became a sub-corporation of the parent. Now, in each province, we have to seat a de jure government. By flying that Canadian flag, you are consenting to their jurisdiction. That is their trademark. They own it. 1976, when the Canadian military changed their uniforms and decided to put the Canadian flag on the shoulders, they were sued by the federal government. And guess who won? The federal government for trademark infringement. So if you think that flag is freedom, Justin Trudeau was looking out the window when those truckers were in Ottawa, and he was going, look, they love me. They love my mandates. They're flying our trademark, and they are consenting. How wonderful of them. So if you think that there's this way that there's a political way to fix this problem, you're incorrect. The only way to fix this problem is through getting together with your communities, creating a constitutional committee within every community, electing your delegates, holding a constitutional convention, seating a de jure government through ratification, and ending this tyranny now. For 91 years, the international community has been waiting for us to do this. The minute we do, we are recognized internationally. Now we can hold these people to account. Think about that. TheMythIsCanada.com, TheMythIsCanada.ca. All of that information is up on that website.
It's just the numbers. If people wonder why, it's based on what I found as the Freemason cube, or the Saturn cube, better known as the Black Sun cube. But I was born on the Ides of March 15th, on my mother's birthday, the 15th, 555. I'm the three main numbers in the middle. When you add those numbers up in any straight line, vertical, horizontal, or diagonal, they add up to 15. 1 plus 5, because they always take it down to the single digit in numerology. 1 plus 5 is 6. This is how they get to 666. Let the one with understanding reckon the meaning of the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. In English, reckon comes from the Greek word to calculate or solve. So it's almost like the text is saying, I'm going to give you a riddle and you need to calculate the number of the beast. Now, I know a lot of people have calculated 666 in Bill Gates's patent on cryptocurrencies, which starts out as 2020, which is twins. Okay. This is all based on twins. They're trying to create a twin Earth with Elon Musk's Neuralink and the metaverse. Meta in Latin, I think, means or Greek means death or dead. So it's like the dead verse, because people will become counterfeits. They're going to lose their free will and their intuition, which I believe I have a lot of. And I was lucky enough to be born with it. So I'm going to leave it off that. I wrote my book. I think it's a good book to read. If anybody needs a book or would like to purchase, I charge $53, shipping included. That's Herbie the Love Bug's number. And you can send me an email. I don't mind. Getting emails. My email is boydanderson17@gmail.com. And you see, Donald Trump, like Jared Kushner fronts, he's a Shabbat Lubavitch. The Shabbat Lubavitch are building a huge community center right here in Saskatoon, right on Zimmerman Road. They're going to start construction next year because they've all cashed in their Bitcoin now, and they're very wealthy. They control the economy in Russia, the Shabbat Lubavitch. They are the original Luciferians, the original Khazar Jews that, were on the Silk Road. That's why they're rebuilding the Silk Road. They call it the Belt and Road. And they've connected China, Beijing, to Tehran, Iran. Therefore, they created all these fires everywhere. I mean, the biggest fire in California was at Ventura County, and it ignited. You see, the Jesuits were founded by Ignatius Loyola. Ignatius in English, it's a Spanish name. Ignatius in English means to ignite. And of course, where did that Ventura County fire ignite? At the St. Thomas Aquinas College. The college never got damaged, but the fire destroyed hundreds and hundreds of homes, and people died. And what did they call that fire? They called it the Thomas Fire. While I was in Dubai, I hung out with Thomas every day, playing backgammon on my laptop because I was trying to get my deal through with these quantum biofeedback devices. Well, what's going to happen really is China wants to rule the world for the next 1,000 years. So they've been buying up all the gold, as well as Russia. Canada, you see, Trudeau, his father made sure, who was a Rosicrucian, right, by the way, and Justin Castro, his so-called father, Pierre Trudeau, he sold off all of our gold. And but all of the prime ministers of Canada are totally guilty. They're all involved. I mean, Brian Mulroney, his wife, she was in, her father in Prague, Czechoslovakia, was into mind control. We made a deal. Stephen Harper, his Minister of Foreign Affairs was Stéphane Dion before they brought in John Baird. Well, he made a deal with Saudi Arabia to build $15 billion worth of armored vehicles in London, Ontario. That they will use. The United Nations will use this against us.
What do you think of Danielle Smith and what she's doing in Alberta?
Oh, it sounds great. Tell the people what they want to hear. It sounds great, but just beware of China. That's all I can say. And the United Nations. Just beware of the United Nations taking over.
Well, they're going to use the UNDRIP in order to, supposedly give the land back to the Indigenous, but they're going to be managing or controlling it, and then they've got the chiefs in their pockets. So in turn, they're going to give the land back to themselves. I don't know what exactly that plan is, but it doesn't seem very good.
Exactly. No, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, this UNDRIP thing is very scary, and for our Christian Canadians,